riding a bicycle.
And they get prosecuted for it.
So they have not been prosecuted, Alan. Don't lie on television where people can
Yes,
fact
they
you.
have
None of them have been prosecuted.
Yes, they have been.
Which soldier?
I know they have been.
Which soldier was
Yes, they have
prosecuted
been.
for dropping a grenade on a child?
There are dozens
You're lying
of them who,
on national TV.
Dozens
Piers
have been
Morgan can come back on the next episode and tell everyone that you're not telling the truth.
Dozens of them have been prosecuted.
Not a single Israeli soldier has been prosecuted for deliberately killing a Palestinian child. That is a lie. A demonstrable lie. Everyone watching right now. I'm sorry, you can't say
hang on. Alan Dershowitz went on live television and asserted as a matter of absolute fact that dozens of Israeli soldiers have been prosecuted for killing innocent Palestinian civilians in Gaza. It was a massive, verifiable misrepresentation, and Mehdi Hasan caught him right on tape. When you look at the actual receipts, independent human rights groups and investigative journalists show that 0 soldiers have been held accountable for deliberate killings of children. Dershowitz had no names, no cases, and no receipts. When pushed on the staggering civilian death toll, he resorted to comparing IDF conduct in Gaza to the mass firebombings of World War II. I'm Neil. This is the honest perspective. Truth over access, facts over spin. Let me show you how a law professor's narrative completely collapsed on air. Let's get into it.
Alan, we've had this conversation.
Israel is now.
Israel's
not
losing.
A single.
I know, but Israel's losing people like me, right? And many like me who had a lot of support for Israel's right to defend itself.
I agree with that.
Because of the sheer volume of innocent children in particular that are being slaughtered on a daily basis. Now, it's an arguable point
it doesn't
whether
even
everything
compare.
the IDF is doing is intentional or not. They say none of it's intentional, but they are killing a staggering number of children in the process of going after Hamas.
Let's just remember one point. One of the greatest days in American history is June 6, 1944, the greatest generation. They killed so many more civilians in the process of ending Nazism. Another great day was VJ Day. I was old enough to remember it. They killed 100,000 or more civilians. Israel is doing far, far less than the United States and Great Britain did. When your people are endangered, when your children are murdered and your women are raped, then you do engage in actions. And particularly, remember, in England and in the United States, the enemy wasn't hiding among civilians, whereas Hamas brags about the fact that its civilians are martyrs. We want them to die. The goal, the tactic of Hamas is let's get Israel to kill as many civilians as possible, 50,000, 60,000, and then we can get Piers Morgan to turn against them. That's their goal. They are targeting you, and you're accepting it because that's their goal. And I don't blame you. Good people support Hamas or at least oppose Israel because they don't understand that all these deaths are the result. No, I'm not saying that. I say good people do. Some people do. The people who march in New York or oppose Israel because they don't fully understand the tactic of Hamas to kill as many.
No, I understand that. Okay, I want to go to Mehdi. I want to go to Mehdi. Alan, I fully understand the tactic of Hamas. What I don't understand.
No, I understand.
What I don't understand are the current tactics of the Israeli government, which seem to be not a lot better. Mehdi, your response.
I mean, I don't know what to respond to. So much was said and so much nonsense there was said about violence and killings by someone, as I say, who's volunteered to defend Netanyahu at the International Criminal Court, where he's been indicted with the former Israeli defense minister for war crimes.
I'm proud of that.
And crimes against humanity. Of course you're proud of it because you don't value Palestinian life. Let's just deal with some things you said. Number one, you talked about deals and negotiations. Gershon Baskin, who is the only Israeli negotiator to have ever successfully negotiated with Hamas, keeps saying, he said it just the other day, go check his Twitter feed, that he has communications from Hamas saying, we have offered the Israeli government a full ceasefire. We will leave government. We will not govern Gaza. We will return all the hostages in return for a permanent ceasefire. Israel doesn't want a permanent ceasefire because Smotrich and others want 60 days and then they go back to the killing when the hostages are released. He's offered a permanent end to the war. Israel doesn't want a permanent end to the war. That's what Baskin is saying. Secondly, you talk about killing of kids.
I do. I would like that.
You talk about killing of kids. I mean, the Israeli military does intentionally kill children.
Deliberate
Let's read
killing of
let's read
kids.
972. Israeli publication interviewed 7 Israeli soldiers and officers, peers, who returned from Gaza. Just last week, in several cases, the soldier said, Israeli troops deliberately targeted children. There was a boy who entered the zone. He didn't do anything. Other soldiers claimed to have seen him standing, talking to people. That's it.
And
they dropped a grenade from a drone. In another incident, soldiers tried to kill a child riding a bicycle.
And they get prosecuted
so
for
they
it.
have not been prosecuted. Alan, don't lie on television where people can
Yes,
fact
they
you.
have
None of them have been
Yes,
prosecuted.
they have been.
Which
I
soldier?
know they have been.
Which soldier was
Yes, they have
prosecuted
been.
for dropping a grenade on a child?
There are dozens
You're lying
of them who,
on national TV.
Dozens
Piers
have been
Morgan can come
prosecuted.
back on the next episode and tell everyone that
you'll
you're not
see
telling the truth.
Dozens of them have been prosecuted.
Not a single
for
Israeli
going and
soldier has been
exceeding
prosecuted
orders.
for deliberately killing a Palestinian
That's
child. That is a
false.
lie. A demonstrable lie. Everyone
That's
watching right now.
false. No,
you
that's
know-
false.
Okay, hang on.
I'm sorry, you can't say things like
they've
that.
been investigated.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, Alan.
Mehdi is laying down concrete reports from Plus 972 magazine, where actual Israeli soldiers describe drones dropping grenades on isolated children. Notice how instantly Dershowitz tries to blurt out a defense by shouting, "Prosecuted!" before Mehdi even finishes detailing the incident.
What Mehdi is saying is that no Israeli soldier has been prosecuted for deliberately
That's a
killing
fact.
a Palestinian child since this war began. Is your information different to that?
Absolutely different. I know for a fact because I was involved in the negotiations with the International Criminal Court, and I arranged for Khan to come to Israel and see the evidence of what has been done, how people have been prosecuted, how the Israeli legal system has been,
No one's been prosecuted. You're lying.
responsive. So I have all the data and all the
Name
information.
them. Come back on this
And
show
of
and name
course
those soldiers.
It's true that they've been prosecuted.
Come back on this show, Alan, and
So
name
the
those soldiers. I
name-
challenge you. Now, I'll finish my point.
I'm
You
happy to
interrupted
do
me.
that.
Hold on. You interrupted
I'm
me. I never
happy to do
interrupted you.
that.
You've
I'm
interrupted
happy
me
to do
twice
that.
now on this
No,
show.
I didn't interrupt you.
You did, actually. You
Piers
interrupted to make
asked me a
false
Well, I
claims.
did
question.
ask, I did
interrupt
ask
you.
Alan a question.
Well,
after
let me
what you
finish
said.
my point. Actually, my second point, Piers, was to you. I dealt with the Gershon Baskin and the deliberate killing of kids. They just killed 6 kids queuing up for
I was
water
about to talk about
yesterday.
that.
They killed 9 kids queuing up for nutritional
They
supplements last week.
acknowledge-
Stop
they
interrupting, Alan. Everyone can
acknowledged
see you
an
do
accident
it.
and it's under
Stop
investigation.
interrupting,
It's
Alan.
under
Otherwise, I'll do it to
investigation.
you and you really won't like it. Piers, let me make my point to you that I'm trying to make.
That is the exact moment the whole narrative falls apart. Dershowitz claims dozens of them have been prosecuted. Mehdi directly issues a simple challenge: name them. Come back on the show and name those soldiers. Dershowitz completely freezes, provides 0 names, and instead tries to talk over Mehdi.
You mentioned the New York Times. I'm glad you've mentioned the New York Times several times. The New York Times piece, the long piece, has a lot in there. 2 important points for you, Piers. I've been coming on this show for over a year talking to you about Gaza. Last April and July, the New York Times reports that Netanyahu's own generals told him, there's no military strategy left. There's nothing more we can do. Stop this war. Netanyahu overrode them. So when I was on this show and you were telling me, of course, they're just defending themselves. What else should they be doing? At that time, when I was on this show, Piers, generals were telling Netanyahu there's no war left to be had. They also make it very clear in this piece that the government would have fallen apart had Netanyahu not prolonged the war because he wanted to avoid prosecution. Yeah. And I'm sorry that we needed the New York Times to say that, because I was saying that on this show to you, Piers. Many people were saying that this war is about Netanyahu trying to avoid prison. This is about Netanyahu trying to avoid prison. I know Alan is an expert on criminals. He's defended some of the worst criminals in the world.
Lawyers do defend criminals.
Well, he defends some of the worst people. Epstein, Netanyahu.
Yeah, but lawyers...
No one forced him to defend these
lawyers
some of the best
Piers, no one forced him to go volunteer to defend Benjamin Netanyahu.
You can't make aspersions against lawyers.
I can actually. I can say you don't need. You don't need to.
It's not very credible to do that.
Really?
Lawyers do their job.
Hold on, Piers. Somebody forced Alan Dershowitz to defend Netanyahu. He said he's proud to do it. No one forced him to do it.
Which criminal should he defend?
I'm proud to do it.
You're proud to defend Benjamin Netanyahu.
He's a criminal lawyer.
You're proud to defend Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein. You defend the worst people in the world.
I was proud.
Okay.
Yes. And I was proud to defend Bill Clinton, and I was proud to defend Ted Kennedy. I've defended people on I've also defended Palestinians who were charged with offenses in Israel. I've also defended Palestinian students at Harvard who wanted to put up a Palestinian flag.
Have you defended Netanyahu's corruption trial? I think you've only defended his war crimes.
But you know what, Mehdi? I do think it's a very lame.
No, I've been involved in his corruption trial too.
It's a very. I've always felt, and a lot of people try this with Alan Dershowitz,
because
there are lots of things you can argue with Alan about what he believes. But when people go ad hominem about him being a lawyer defending bad
Piers,
people...
well, I'm going to respond now since we both come to me.
Most criminal lawyers I've ever met at some stage defend pretty
Piers,
dodgy
I want
people.
You, Piers, look
it's
at that.
their job, literally their job.
We're looking at our cameras. Look in your camera and say honestly that you would say to Saddam Hussein's law or Slobodan Milosevic's law or Vladimir Putin's law, you wouldn't say a word about people who choose in the West to go defend those people? Yes, you would. It's just you give Netanyahu a pass. I see him in the same league as Saddam Hussein, Vladimir Putin, Slobodan Milosevic. If a Westerner chooses to go defend these people, no one forced him to. I'm going to question their moral
judgment. Do they have a right to defend?
Of course they have a right to a defense.
Then they should have a right.
But no one forced.
Well, hang on. Then they should have a right to have a lawyer defending them.
Of course.
You understand that?
Understood.
That's how the legal system works.
So if a British
justice
hold
works.
on, Piers, if a British lawyer volunteered to go defend Putin, you wouldn't cast any moral aspersions on them. Don't lie, Piers. You know you would.
So just to be clear, who should Alan be defending? Give me some criminal names.
People in New York, people wherever he lives.
Which criminals?
Why does he have to go defend Netanyahu?
Give me some names.
Hold on. Why does he have to go defend Netanyahu?
I do have.
I think it's a crazy
half of my cases
I look
pro
at
bono.
vile people and I wonder, why would you volunteer to go defend that person?
Because they're lawyers. Anyway, let's move on to the more substantive part of this.
Mehdi highlights the crucial point from the New York Times report. Netanyahu's own military generals told him as far back as mid-2024 that the military campaign had reached its limits and that the war was being prolonged solely for his political survival.
I mean, Alan, this incident that Mehdi referenced, the strike on a water distribution point at a Gaza refugee camp that killed 10 people, including 6 children, wounded 17 more. The IDF said it intended to hit an Islamic Jihad militant, but a technical error caused the missile to miss its target. But, having technical errors that wipe out 6 kids in a refugee camp at this stage of this war.
Terrible.
And these stories are coming every day now. How does this end?
War is hell, and these kinds of accidents happen all the time. Many Israelis have been killed by Israeli-friendly fire. Many, including a relative of mine who was killed by friendly fire. Accidents happen. Israelis immediately announced that they would investigate, and if warranted, it might have been a pure accident, but if warranted, there'll be prosecution. Israel prosecutes its own criminals, and it does it all the time. And of course, Hamas rewards them. The Palestinian Authority pays terrorists to kill, pay for slay. There's an enormous difference. The United States government had many cases of accidental killings during every war we fought. And the difference between a democracy and a tyranny is that in a democracy, you investigate. And you investigate.
Alan, before I go back to Mehdi, just on a profound level, I ask you this question. In what way is it remotely proportionate that Israel has now killed anything between 70 and 100,000 people on the Palestinian side, of which, let's say a quarter, maybe a third are Hamas terrorists? We don't know. But let's say that is the proportion of that number that have been killed, which means maybe 60,000 civilians have been killed. In what way is that remotely proportionate to an attack that killed 1,200 people, of which I think 800 were civilians, and wounded many more, and kidnapped 250? It's so disproportionate now that what concerns me about this, if I'm an Israeli, a moderate Israeli, so not a far-right Israeli or an extremist or any of these things, I'm just an average Israeli citizen watching what my government is doing in Gaza now and seeing the fury that is building around the world to this daily slaughter. This is terrible for Israel. It's terrible for Israel's reputation. I think it's dangerous.
I agree.
It's dangerous for Jewish people. I think that the rising tide of anti-Semitism was despicable when it happened in the aftermath of October the 7th. It highlighted a cancer in the world, that people would react to that attack by being openly anti-Semitic towards Jewish people. But now a lot of that anti-Semitism, I'm sure, is being fueled by what is happening in Gaza. And I think, so I feel for Jewish people too. So I just, to me, none of this makes any sense now. You agree?
Well, of course it doesn't make, yes, and that's why Hamas is winning. Hamas is succeeding. Hamas set out to turn the world against Israel, and they realized that if they murdered 1,200 people, kidnapped people, there would be a reaction. And then they went further, and they hid themselves beneath mosques and schools, and they generated the kind of killing that results in good people like you changing your mind about Israel. That's Hamas's strategy. Hamas is winning. Hamas prevailed on
my
October
point is
7th,
Israel is
and
losing.
it's going to repeat it over and over again.
I think Israel is losing in the court of public opinion. There are
That's
many
my point. I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's my point.
But then the strategy
Hamas
is losing.
winning. Israel. Well,
So stop
what's
the
the
war.
alternative? The alternative is to let. No, of course, let's stop the war, and Israel has offered to do it. Just today,
That's not true.
Israel put an offer on the table
They've
that
not
has
stopped
been
it. They've asked
rejected.
for
The
60
point that I
days.
want to make, let me just finish my point. The point I want to make is Hamas had a strategy. We know there are captured documents that say it. That is, get Israel to kill as many Palestinian civilians as possible, and it will turn Piers Morgan against Israel because he's a good and decent person. And the good and decent people in the world on college campuses will turn against Israel. That's Hamas's strategy. We can't let it prevail because if we do, they'll do it over and over and over again.
What you just witnessed on that screen wasn't just a heated moment of cable news crosstalk. It was a complete structural collapse of an official talking point live on air when confronted with simple, verifiable facts. When Alan Dershowitz looked into the camera and claimed that dozens of Israeli soldiers have been criminally prosecuted for killing Palestinian children, he wasn't offering an opinion. He was stating a concrete factual claim designed to convince the audience that there is a functioning legal apparatus holding soldiers accountable. And when Mehdi Hasan cut right through the noise and asked the simplest follow-up question possible, name them. Name one single soldier who was prosecuted for dropping a grenade on a child. Dershowitz had nothing. 0 names. 0 case citations. 0 receipts. He blustered, he interrupted, and he tried to assert authority based on his legal credentials, but on the single point of fact that he brought to the table, he completely froze. And the reason he couldn't name anyone is that those prosecutions simply do not exist in reality. According to reporting by Israeli news outlets like Plus 972 Magazine and Haaretz, alongside detailed tracking by legal oversight bodies like Yesh Din and B'Tselem, systemic impunity is the baseline operational policy. Out of hundreds of formal complaints submitted regarding military conduct, destruction of civilian infrastructure, and the unlawful killing of civilians in Gaza, internal IDF inquiries almost universally end in one of 2 ways. They are either quietly closed without charges, or they are stalled indefinitely in bureaucratic limbo. The claim that there is active, routine internal accountability for soldiers who fire on civilians or drop drone strikes on unarmed children is a total myth. A narrative shield crafted for Western television screens that disintegrates the exact second someone asks for evidence. Look at how Dershowitz pivoted the second that narrative shield failed. When he couldn't back up his claim about prosecutions, he reached for what might be an even more disturbing argument: historical moral equivalence. He explicitly invoked World War II, bringing up June 6, 1944, and VJ Day. He argued that because Allied forces killed tens of thousands of civilians in the process of defeating Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, the civilian casualty toll in Gaza shouldn't concern us or undermine the war effort. Think about the sheer desperation of that legal defense. Modern international humanitarian law, specifically the Geneva Conventions, was written precisely after World War II to make sure the world never again accepted the total war doctrine of carpet-bombing cities and treating civilian populations as collateral damage. When a world-renowned legal scholar has to fall back on 1940s-era total warfare arguments to rationalize why children are getting shot queuing for water or aid supplies, it means the moral and legal argument for this military campaign has completely run out of road. Even Piers Morgan, who spent months echoing standard talking points and defending Israel's right to defend itself, looks at the staggering body count and recognizes that invoking D-Day to justify the daily slaughter of kids in a blockaded strip of land isn't just morally absurd, it's horrifying. And this brings us right back to the broader pattern that the New York Times investigation laid bare. As Raviv Drucker and Alex Gibney pointed out earlier in the show, and as Mehdi reiterated, the military campaign is no longer being driven by strategic national security goals. The top Israeli generals themselves told Netanyahu months ago that the military campaign had achieved whatever it could realistically achieve, and that further prolonging it yields no strategic victory. It is being prolonged because Netanyahu relies on far-right extremists like Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir to keep his government coalition alive and keep himself out of a courtroom on corruption charges. So when defenders of this war go on television, they aren't defending a coherent defense strategy. They are defending a political survival strategy. And to defend that strategy, they have to rely on claims that don't hold up under 5 seconds of scrutiny, whether it's fabricated military prosecutions or revisionist history. The credibility of media analysis comes down to verifying receipts and refusing to let public figures gaslight the public with unbacked claims. When someone claims there is accountability, demand the names. When someone claims the war is about defense, check what the military generals are actually saying behind closed doors. If you believe in holding power accountable, fact-checking narrative spin, and centering human rights above political access, subscribe to The Honest Perspective. I'm Neil. Demand receipts, call out the lies, and stand for truth. That's The Honest Perspective, and that's where I'll leave you.